Now moving on to Tirreno Adriatico, which was a bit of a sleepy stage for the majority of it. 221 Ks, a really long one, Monteciano to Tirreno, over 3,000 meters climbing, just a lot of rollers, but no extended climbs except the Poggio della Croce, 4.5 Ks at 7.5%, about 136 Ks, 130 Ks into the stage. The final was kind of just an uphill drag, just a nasty uphill drag that riders afterwards said was harder than they expected, with a left-hand turn with about 250, 300 meters to go, maybe a bit less. And it's just I think the second to last kilometer was about 3% gradient. It was a bit flatter in the last K, but how did this stage play out, Benji, for the first 2/3 of it?
So we had a breakaway, like always. Marc Padun, Mattia Bijs, we had Tobias Ludvigsson, Guillaume Bovin, Niki Terpstra. Of those, Padun was the rider that, for me, seemed to be the strongest in the breakaway. And he's also the rider that was with Narvaez in that Giro stage that Narvaez won, but Padun punctured in the last descent and wasn't able to fight for a stage. So that was unfortunate. But he tried again today in Tirreno. Break, it got a huge gap for a bit, 9 minutes, I think, with 100k into the race. So they certainly let them go for a tiny bit, but then it started gradually being climbed back.
Bernal, MVDP came to the front with like 100 Ks to go with Bernal and Alaphilippe, and they're like, yeah, let's create a split. They just can't help themselves. They're just addicted to racing action at the moment. And it caused Ewan to be dropped.
Exactly, and the thing about Ewan is usually he's not terrible at crosswinds, I dare to say. Sometimes he's inconsistent in them, which
he was
is
good
not
at UAE.
Always useful. Yeah, at UAE he was good at them, but the issue here at hand is that he also dropped from the latter groups and he started riding alone at the end of the race. And when you're in that situation, you're basically fucked because try and get in the time at that point if you're
100k
alone.
TT, Milano Sanremo training.
So he said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna jump in the car," and he's driving home in the car tonight. So
I think he might have felt unwell. I don't know. Like it was a little bit. The pace wasn't super hard, but then again, it didn't surprise. He was third in the betting for this stage, Benji, and I have to say I went pretty heavily against it. When I see the number, apart from Milano Sanremo, where I still don't. I know he came second, but that was in a different era before the new world of Van der Poel, Alaphilippe, and Wout van Aert. But yeah, didn't really like him for today's stage, but still getting dropped that early, I didn't expect that either. Jumbo-Visma, they said, we're not chasing anymore. The gap went down to 3 minutes, and they're like, no, we're not doing this all on our own because Alpecin and Quickstep weren't helping. And then the gap went out to 6 minutes, and then eventually Alpecin and De Koenig started to help them because I think they were leaning on them being like, well, you got the leader's jersey, so why don't you chase, even though we got Ballerini and Mathieu van der Poel and Alaphilippe. And I think that was good from Jumbo-Visma. They're like, well, it's 10 bonus seconds, but whatever. It's your stage that you might want to win as well. But yeah, sorry, when did they get caught, Benji, the breakaway?
Well, I don't know the exact kilometer, but they got caught, and we were leading with the peloton towards a finish. And obviously, the three teams that you just mentioned were Alaphilippe's team, De Koenig, Van Aert's team, Jumbo, and Van der Poel's team, Alpecin, at the front. I personally thought that Alaphilippe was not going to be the person that they would be riding for today. You thought it as well yesterday. I think Ballerini was the name you named as well for the stage, next to the two people that we also kind of expected here, which were Van der Poel and Van Aert. So it was looking like it was going to happen the way we kind of expected it to, the peloton going towards the final climb. But unfortunately, just before that final section, we had a pretty serious crash on the left side of the road, including the likes of Tesfatsion, Kung, Simmons, Oss. Simmons once again pretty unlucky when it comes to the crashes, and Aolo Cometa rider ahead of him seemed to slide onto the floor. And yeah, it didn't look too great for the Aolo rider, so I hope he's pretty fine. Some people made a mistake going into the final climbing section. I think with a good 1 kilometer to go, we had the third lead out of De Koenig moving to the front. I think it was Stibar that was heading to the front and taking the front once they went on to the climbing section with a good 1,200 meters to go or something. We noticed just beforehand that Van der Poel was like in 20 wheel once again, and then 100 meters later he was in fifth wheel. So teleportation skills likely actually there.
He was so deep. He was so far back with like 1,500 meters to go on this climb, and there was a narrow road too. And then it changed to a front end shot, and he's suddenly there. And everyone was like, "Excuse me, where did you come from on Wout van Aert's wheel?" How many people did Wout van Aert have? He only really had Timo Rosen. He only had one lead up man from like 1,300, right?
Yes, Timo Rosen was moving on the front on the left side of the road. Van der Poel made that teleportation move into the wheel basically of Van Aert there. I think that Ballerini and Alaphilippe were both at the front together with Stibar, like we just mentioned. Stibar moving to the front into the last corner, really, and basically taking that corner onto the climbing section, which really started kicking up right now with Alaphilippe in second wheel and Ballerini not in third wheel. And he made a mistake in the last corner because Van Avermaet was moving up on the right, and he gave his third spot away to Van Avermaet. And Ballerini was not in the wheel of Alaphilippe there, and that made a huge difference for the last kilometer because after a good 200 meters into that final kilometer, Alaphilippe looked behind into a rightwards bend, and he noticed, well, Ballerini's not in my wheel. He's 2 wheels behind, so Shebar's ahead of me. Van Avermaet is in my wheel. Van Aert and Van der Poel are behind Ballerini. How can I handle this? And he has a genius idea of basically soft pedaling, allowing Stibar to create a gap ahead of him, and basically allows Stibar to take that gap onto the others and try and force others to take over and force those others to close the gap to spend their energy. Who could do that? Van Avermaet, Van Aert, or Van der Poel? Ballerini's not going to do it because Stibar's at the front. And also Alaphilippe's not going to do it because he just opened the gap to Stibar. So it would be stupid to do it himself. And there was one rider that reacted to that, and that's Wout van Aert. I don't know. I'm not sure whether it's really a mistake to react to that. Somebody had to do it, and I think Van Aert is the more impulsive person to do it. Van der Poel would also do it, but I think Van der Poel...
Van der Poel was kind of boxed in. While Van Aert had the clearer lane to the left-hand side, Van der Poel was kind of mid-pack and only then had space to follow Wout van Aert to the left. I think leader's jersey on his shoulders. He wants the bonus seconds ahead of Pogacar and co. Maybe he thought he could gap them off his wheel. I mean, it's tough, Benji. And that's why it's such a good move from Alaphilippe. But what happened then?
Van Aert decided to close the gap on Stibar. He did it not really at the fullest pace. He kept in mind that he had to sprint afterwards, so was closing it down with that idea in mind. Van der Poel decided to directly jump onto Van Aert's wheel. He was getting a lead out from Van Aert, basically, which is amazing. And then the other people behind started mingling about a bit, and that, I think, is also an issue for Ballerini here, because Ballerini had Alaphilippe, who came from the front, move back, and Van Avermaet was still ahead of Ballerini. And he had to make a decision. Either Ballerini stays in the wheel of Van Avermaet, which is not ideal. Either he tries to stay in the wheel of Alaphilippe and hopes that Alaphilippe gives him a lead out, which is also not ideal, but it's perhaps the better decision. Or he can go around Alaphilippe and go onto the wheel of Van der Poel. And I think that would have been the wisest decision, but he decided to go with the second decision and stay in Alaphilippe's wheel. And I don't think Alaphilippe recognized that directly. And I don't think Alaphilippe immediately thought, oh shit, I need to do a lead out now. And he looked behind, and then he started to realize, okay, I need to get back on the wheel of the likes of Van der Poel and Van Aert here. And Van Aert was closing down the gap to Stibar, flew past him in the last section. Van der Poel started sprinting on the right of Van Aert, and they started doing that 1v1 basically. And it's the same kind of sprint that we see in the Tour of Flanders in a bit of a similar way, because Van Aert is kind of forced to not go all out and doesn't have an all-out speed into the last section, which allows Van der Poel, a rider with more acceleration in the sprint. The initial boost in the sprint is always on Van der Poel's side. And yeah, it gave him so much more energy to fly past Van Aert there. I think Van Aert also spent a lot of energy catching Stibar there, and that is how Van der Poel won the race today.
Alaphilippe ended up coming 34th. I think he was really decelerating through that corner. I think Alaphilippe assumed that Ballerini had jumped onto Van der Poel
so as well.
or Higuita and wasn't really doing a proper lead out at that point. And then Ballerini was sitting behind him. Oh shit, I got to jump now, and he had to. By that point, he was too late. I think two things obviously really counted for Van der Poel in this, as Benji already alluded to. The left-hand corner caused them to slow down, and then it's an accelerative sprint that suits Van der Poel more, going from a lower speed. Secondly, obviously, Wout van Aert having to do a lot of work in the last 500 meters, closing down Stibar. Getting a full draft off him is just ideal. And when I saw Wout van Aert closing it, I was like, you can't win. Like you literally can't win the stage with Van der Poel on your wheel. Your level is too similar that there's no chance. And Quick-Step losing the wheel, as you'll remember, Benji, obviously, and everyone listening, stage 6 of Vuelta a San Juan Internacional in 2020, 174k stage, finishing in the Autodromo El Villacum. Quick-Step lost the wheel of Stibar in the last kilometer in a kind of uphill undulating finish, and he ended up winning that stage. So we've seen them do it with Stibar before.
Yeah.
Do you think, I feel like Alaphilippe had no confidence in Ballerini today, honestly. As weird as that sounds, I feel like he wasn't comfortable, because at that point, Benji, they could have just done a normal lead out for Ballerini and seen if he was able to beat Wout van Aert and Van der Poel heads up. Like, Stibar would have led them through to the last corner, that left-hander. Alaphilippe would have kicked out of the left-hander, and Ballerini, would have had the chance to win, or could have sprinted from there. Was the problem, you think, that he'd somehow lost Alaphilippe's wheel?
Yeah, I think that's the initial problem, and that's the initial reason why Alaphilippe also made a decision to actually open up the gap. He looked behind, and directly afterwards, he decided to let Stibar go.
True.
So I really think that the reason that Ballerini did not get a lead out today by Alaphilippe there in the way that it was supposed to be done is because Van Avermaet was able to take the wheel of Alaphilippe going into the climbing section in the last kilometer. And I think that's the all deciding factor. I think Ballerini made mistakes. I think Alaphilippe made some mistakes, perhaps. I think that Ballerini's insight today, perhaps, was a bit of an issue. And I think that's because Alaphilippe probably didn't realize he had to do a lead out still for Ballerini. Ballerini should have realized that that's a possibility that Alaphilippe would think that. And instead, he decided to stay on Alaphilippe's wheel for a bit. And there he lost positions. Higuita was able to get past him. Like, it's a tiny dude. Come on.
Yeah. I think this stage will go down in my memory for a long time because of Mathieu van der Poel's post up before the line. He's come past Wout van Aert, who's dead. Van der Poel crosses his hands, mean mugs. It's going to be an iconic image, I think. And he was mad after losing the stage yesterday, or whatever it was. Yesterday that he thought he should have won. He was out of position. Wout van Aert won the first stage. Alaphilippe the second stage, Van der Poel the third stage, Van Aert second, Ballerini third, Higuita fourth, Van Avermaet fifth, Jasper de Boist sixth, Benji, with no U in there, sprinted for himself. Ivan Garcia Cortina seventh after crashing. He had road rash all on his right thigh today. Tadej Pogacar still up there, eighth, Gonzalo Serrano ninth, and Hugo Hofstetter 10th. I just want to see where Bernal is on. It looks, Benji, like Bernal, Sivakov, and Thomas all lost about 30 seconds or 25 seconds today. They've dropped down GC quite a bit, maybe less than that, 12 to 15 seconds. So Bernal is now on 38, Sivakov 37, Thomas 39.
That's not ideal.
Yeah, that's not good going into Prato di Tivo, which is tomorrow's stage. The proper mountain test. This Tirreno Adriatico is just ridiculous. It's so good. 148k stage. This is one of the best 1 week races I've ever seen. We're 3 stages in, and I can't wait for tomorrow. 148k is from Terni to Prati di Tivo. I keep calling it Prato di Tivo. Prati di Tivo. 2 all category climbs. The first one's not actually so hard. They got a roll 7.6k's at 5%. At about 62 k's in. Then they do the Passo Capanelle, 13.8 k's at 4.5%. I don't think that will particularly worry Wout van Aert or Van der Poel, and I don't expect any attacks there with a long, what is that? Like a 25 kilometer descent afterwards. And then the big test, which I cannot wait to see, 14.5 k's at 7%. The climb tomorrow, perfectly regular, gradient as well. It's between 6 and 7 just about for the entirety of 1k at 8. But yeah, very, very regular climb. Same with the Passo Capanera. What do you think is going to happen, Benji? Because I don't think Pogacar has the train to set things up. So I think Pogacar is going to have to rely on other teams doing it for him. Maybe he got lucky with Bernal losing so much time.
He'll have no issue. Like, Ineos Grenadiers are there. They're going to do the train for him this time around. They're going to do what Jumbo did in the Tour de France and basically cause him to have a perfect lead out into the last section. I think the only surprise that Ineos can make is if they play tactically on the final climb, if they isolate Pogacar and then decide to play with Sivakov, Thomas, and Bernal. That could be really interesting, because if they just do a three-man train and do stuff like that, then it's going to end with Pogacar not losing time that day. So they got to play it very special to try and make something happen. They've got the team to explode stuff, but the fact that he lost time today,
Maybe they got caught up with a crash at a bad time. No 3 kilometer
yeah.
rule outside the 3Ks. It was at like 3.3Ks. What can you do? I guess.
Was
But
Bernal
yeah,
not
Bernal.
in the crash? I swear I saw Bernal standing at the side of the road at some point.
Yeah, he was in the crash. So I feel like they just
No,
got
that.
really unlucky.
Yeah,
They were
then
they
we
were in
can't really
weird
blame
position
them.
though. They were in weird position.
Yeah, usually Ineos is the team that is able to stay at the front of the peloton, keeping themselves from harm. And right now they were not really in the position that they usually do that. So perhaps a bit of
Benji.
nonchalance going into the last section, not being in a position where you can be safe from crashes happening behind you. But I don't really think we can blame them then if they lost the time because of the crash. I think we will see fireworks tomorrow. I hope so, and I expect it. Do you
I
think
know.
that Van Aert?
Hold on. I know everyone likes Filippo Ganna, but he ain't no Luke Rowe yet. That's for
Yeah,
sure. He did one nice pull in the UAE into the last 1,500 meters, which not as helpful because it's already past the 3K mark. But yeah, I've not seen Ganna consistently getting on the front, keeping Bernal and Co safe in these latter ends of these stages. So yeah, something he might need to look at as well, and something he should theoretically be good at. But yeah, shame that Thomas Bernal and Sivakov lost time. Sorry, you're going to ask me a question.
yes, Van Aert, Prato di Tivo. What do you expect?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't
It
see it
really
happening.
depends. Nah, he looks. I was looking at photos of the Tour de France last year. Just wistfully on my wall, and he does look. It does look very different. Like he does look in cobbled shape at the moment. Like he was very, very skinny then. And that was when he was climbing really well. And 14.7 Ks at 7%. Simon Yates here. Who knows what Simon Yates will bring? I'm not actually expecting too much.
He'll drop himself again. I can feel
Yeah,
it.
I don't see it. And you know the problem, Benji, is that the Jumbo Visma don't have anyone to pace for Van Aert. Like, there's no Koos here. What, Foss maybe? Foss and Hessink? Hessink hasn't looked in great form. Like, they don't really have the team to support him either.
Yeah,
So, yeah. Who are you picking? What do you think? You think he's going to lose? But how much time would he lose? 30? 40?
53 seconds.
That means he's still right up there on GC, though. If he loses 53 seconds, then he'll still be,
I believe
10
he'll top
seconds.
10 Tirreno.
Yeah, that's probably, I'd say that's a good shout at this point, given that Devo's the main test. What is he? Landa. I think Bahrain will try something for Landa as well. So there'll be a lot of other teams pacing. I don't think it'll be an easy climb. What about Van der Poel, Benji?
No, I don't believe in it. I think that Van der Poel has clearly set his sights on what he wants to achieve in the season. I don't think he's in a Lombardia form in any way. I don't see it happening that he comes out on top here on this race. I think he's going to have a similar result than Van Aert, but I'm not sure he's going to try as much. I just don't know. I don't know what to expect, but
I'm betting on Alaphilippe for the stage.
it's a good take after what we saw in Provence. He was good there. I think that he was only dropped by Bernal in the last 500 meters there. So yeah,
After
I think it's
working
very
the
much
whole.
possible. I'm gonna go for Pogacar. I'm gonna stick with the basics and be. Yeah, he's apparently a good climber.
I can't wait to see this stage tomorrow
Yeah.
for Tirreno Adriatico.